episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome everybody again to another episode of our show, bringing you another really fascinating guest today who is helping to create a better tomorrow for all of us. We have the honor today of being joined by Dr. Kevin Perrott, who is adjunct professor, University of Alberta, founder and CEO of OpenCures, co-founder and advisor to Ocean Biotechnologies, president of the Global Health Span Policy Institute, and co-founder and treasurer of the SENS Research Foundation. Kevin is a very successful entrepreneur. He's the owner of the largest motorcycle and snowmobile dealership in Canada. He became a cancer survivor back in the day, an experience which clearly taught him there were major deficiencies in the current health tech development paradigm, where customers had no or little to no input in what was going on with health solutions. And ultimately that led him on the path of trying to find new solutions and putting his energies towards these deficiencies. In 2003, Kevin joined Aubrey de Grey and David Gobel to form the Methuselah Foundation, which at the time offered a variety of competitive prizes for advances in longevity science. A couple of years later, he became co-founder with Aubrey de Grey and others of SENS Research Foundation to help develop interventions able to repair or make harmless the damage that accumulates and underlines many of the multiple age-related disorders. Most recently, Kevin formed OpenCures, a for-benefit corporation helping individuals perform self-directed research, generate data, and ultimately focus the value of their data on health solutions they're interested in. Kevin's authored or co-authored several peer-reviewed articles, all focused on accelerating the science underlying the development of therapies for degenerative diseases. He's a co-founder of multiple nonprofit and for-profit entities whose missions are aligned with this purpose. Kevin has a PhD, University of Alberta, work performed in the Capizzi lab at the Buck Institute. His PhD is in biomedical engineering, also undergrad, double major in biology and chemistry. And we're lucky to have him today. Kevin Perrott, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show.
Well, thanks for having me, Ira. I really appreciate you bringing me in and asking my opinion on some of this stuff. That's quite a list of stuff. Yeah, it just means I'm older now, a lot older than when I started, and I've tried a lot of things that haven't worked. Because really my ultimate goal is to cure aging, and we're still not doing that. And not much further down the road, unfortunately, than probably we were when we first started. There's certainly a lot of promise, there's a lot of pots boiling, but dinner is not served. And everybody's fighting over who gets to bring the dessert and who's bringing what. You know, it's an interesting thing. I think if anything that anybody can take away from this discussion with you today, it's the necessity for collaboration against a common enemy. We shouldn't be competing with each other, and health is actually wealth. So if somebody is actually trying to make money off of health, making health, they should be still focused on making health first. It is priceless. Let's try not to spend too much time thinking about, you know, what we can get out of it on the way to health, because when health runs out, you'll never wish for another Tesla or another, you know, bigger bank balance. So just to put it into the terms, you know, when I started with SENS, you know, in 2003, Aubrey had said that we could potentially control aging, you know, if you just address these 7 forms of damage. And I had just gone through a cancer situation, which really brought home to me the amount of suffering going on in every hospital, and even outside of the hospitals, all the homes that currently have people who are suffering and sick. And I mean, it's just beyond comprehension. We try not to think about it. And it's only when we're forced with our face up against the glass of our own mortality that we really start to contemplate what is happening to our fellows. And what is eventually going to happen to us. So I call people patients in waiting, you know, or the currently healthy, you know, just to underline, you know, the memento mori that's necessary. People have to remember their mortality and not be afraid of it and actually face it. But it is only in standing up to it that we will actually take the reins and really maximize the amount of force we can apply to solving this problem. So collaboration, key. Remembering why we're doing this is because there's a whole bunch of people out there who are suffering, and we will be soon enough one of those people. And we already have people that we know who are getting older. And so there's a pregnancy here that we all feel, but we need to bring it to term, and we have to make sure that it is going to happen as fast as possible. There's just no stone should be left unturned. I do not want to be on my deathbed, thinking if I could have done a little bit more, or I could have done something differently. And we all really need to work together on this common problem, and we can make massive progress. The synergies we're starting to see, even right now, are amazing. But anyway, so that's sort of like the beginning, a bit of a prologue.
Sure.
And that's kind of my guiding principle of why I'm doing this.
No, that's awesome. And as you talk about the collaboration, obviously, you and I have sort of been in the mix a little bit the last couple of decades, I would say, as this
We're getting old.
This sort of nascent longevity industry has blossomed, it's begun to grow, and somebody has begun collaborating. Obviously, there's infighting here and there that goes on. But as you point out, as I mentioned in sort of the intro, there are also customers, or I call them patients, as you were just mentioning, the 7 billion on this planet. And one of the fascinating things when I was, going through your OpenCures material, you refer to the potential for ultimately sort of 7 billion self-directed researchers. That ultimately there's a lot of people out there, a lot of data that could also come to the fore here, as opposed to just the folks in academia or some of these companies that are being set up. Talk a little bit about what you've done with OpenCures, the principle for benefit company. And then I was reading through some of your paper, Skyline for Small Molecules, how you're sort of making sort of this on-demand capability for information to come in and process. Obviously, we don't all have NMRs and HPLCs and so forth in our homes, but sort of creating this integrated system to create these self-directed researchers to really increase this sort of knowledge base that we have.
Yeah. So, the first thing that I'd like to say is, when I was finishing my PhD, I'm working with mass spectrometry.
Yep.
And I've been puzzling for 20 years or 17 years at that point, or 16 years, as to how to speed things up. Like, why are things so slow? And the reason is obviously because the people who need the products and services are not the ones developing them. That's what it basically comes down to, is that the motivation and the sense of urgency that people who need the products and services, this is not there. And that's in academia as well as in commercialization and biotech and that. So I was hoping to be able to run my own blood through the system in order to get data, just to analyze my own health. And then I realized, if everybody had access to the capacity to generate large volumes of data, see, first of all, we're all 23andMe, or at least most people are trying to get their DNA done. Yep. So that's one dimension of data. And data, it comes to the point where it doesn't matter how. I thought about, okay, actually, rapamycin has been around, known since 2008 to extend healthy lifespan in mice. We still haven't achieved a proper trial in humans to look for longevity benefits of rapamycin, although that is now ongoing with Ageless RX, which is a telemedicine platform, who we're helping. But I was in Tahoe at a Gordon conference for aging, and this was back 2009, 2010. And the newly appointed director of the NIA was Felipe Sierra at the time. And he was talking about funding, as usual. How do we get more funding for basic biology of aging research? And I said, you have a poster child. I said, you have the poster child. Rapamycin has now been shown to extend maximum healthy lifespan. For the first time, something other than caloric restriction has been actually demonstrated to be able to change the aging trajectory unambiguously. And that should have been trumpeted. So, but now it's taken when is the next better rapamycin? When is the next better thing? Where's the upgrade? So how do we get an intervention that is currently available to be tried, produce samples? It's a cycle. So you try an intervention, it produces samples, The samples are analyzed to produce data. The data is analyzed and is aggregated and analyzed, and then you look for the next better drug, or you look for something better out of that data. So that's a cycle, and then you start over again. It's the research development cycle. It's a very common thing. It's not even, I'm thinking, well, it takes 15 years and $15 billion right now for one drug just to get through that cycle. And I'm 58, and is this even like, what? It's not, it's a divide by zero. The probability that the current system is capable of bringing forward aging interventions in a time frame relevant for me is almost, I realize I'm kind of hopeless. We have to speed things up dramatically if we want to make sure that we don't leave any stones unturned, you know? This is about minimization of time. And how do you just like a cancer patient, that is the only thing that they're interested in. Time to when do I get my cure? Yep. It's the same, it's the same thing that, you know, everybody should be concerned with. It's about time, because you never know when you're going to run out. Yep. I was healthy, and then I got diagnosed with cancer, and I was in my 30s. You know, everybody has this optimism bias. They think they're going to be the ones to make it to supercentenarian status or something. You know, that's not going to happen. And let's just all be honest with what is really happening and how quickly it's going to happen. We need to speed up this cycle. And so of the components of the cycle, which are, you know, apply the intervention, obtain the sample, generate the data, you know, which is the most important part of the cycle? Well, you can have the best machine learning, you can have the best doctors, you can have the best everything, but if you don't have any data to operate on, you've got nothing. So it came to me, we don't even know what normal health is properly. It's starting to come clear, like there's enough biomarker information that we can kind of say what a simple consensus of human health would be. But if I could go back in time to take 25-year-old me's blood and compare it to 58-year-old's me, I'd like to overlay those and see what's changed that makes me 5 times more likely to get a degenerative disease today than I was then. So we really need to have a consensus model for human health. And then we need to use that consensus model to be able to predict how the system will move from a systems biology perspective. And we don't have enough data to create that in silico model yet. So there's a lot of genetic data and everything, but what we need to do, we need to create a systems biology driven prediction model so we can test hypotheses for interventions, millions of them at the same time in the shortest time frame, and get rid of the necessity, at least for the first pass or two, to have to use wet lab humans in wet labs at all. This is the promise of AI. This is the promise of, you know, getting enough data to fuel AI, and we really need to work on that. If we don't do that, then we're left with this current, you know, piecemeal, chase some fireflies in the dark system and hope, you know, we're just not going to make it. So what is the goal of the whole industry? Is it to make money, or is it to make interventions? And I tell you, there isn't a 60-year-old that hopes they're going to make $1 billion on the next longevity thing, that once they get to be 70 or whatever, they're going to want the intervention a little bit more than the $1 billion. So there's a lot of new energy coming into the field for sure, but a lot of that energy is not authentic. It's very hypocritical, frankly, where everybody is using the misery and suffering of others as an excuse to make money and personal gain and personal fame, which are two major drivers of healthy people. But again, I want to get the sick people. I want to give them power and empower them. So without their suffering, or without our suffering, because I'm my first customer, there is no reason to develop a health technology. Without our data, they can't develop a health technology. So everything in between our data, our suffering and our data, and even beyond, should be under our control to some degree, because the suffering is the whole reason and data is the means. And yet we have zero control over the research development process. And how can we at least make the system more responsive and responsible to the individuals who want the health technologies or need them? And that's by giving them and empowering them with their data. So rather than just getting it, so you help them generate it, you help them understand it, you pool it together, you create data sets which have value, and then you can use that value to reward researchers doing work that you're interested in, or you can use it, you can sell it, and you can personally, financially gain out of it so that you can afford all the treatments that you're going to put your money in your health insurance because you're going to need it. So we need to turn the whole system over on its head and empower the individual, which is great because this is the age of the internet and this is the age of Web3 and a whole bunch of other technologies that are now blockchain and cryptocurrencies. So they're helping individuals sort of begin to take agency in ways that they weren't before. And by that, so that's how we harness this need and you give it a little bit more control over the research and development. So that's why I formed OpenCures. Selfishly, I wanted to be able to run my own samples through mass spectrometers and understand what was going on about my health. And then even more selfishly, I want everybody to pool their data together so that we can actually reach significant, because I'm 58, I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm under no false illusion that it's just going to be automatic, that, it's going to happen. But even more importantly, my father is 80 and my mom is 77. And I'm giving them advice and they're following it, and they're having old people's problems, but they're not, suffering too badly. And my mom actually is doing incredibly well since she started really being aggressive. But what about that whole entire generation? What about, or did we just write them off as an industry? 20 years ago, they were in their late 50s. Yep. They were my age. And I was, what happens? Why are we not balls out going to try to save the lives of our parents and older loved ones? Why is this not a major fucking topic of conversation? I am livid when I talk to the rest of the people in the industry and all they can talk about is how much money they're going to make instead of how many lives they're going to save. I've been doing this a long time. I know money's important. I'm an entrepreneur and I know you need to feed the fire and you need to feed the beast, and greed is a great motivator, but it's not as great a motivator as trying to avoid pain. Unfortunately, pain needs to be acute for it to be a motivator. Anyway, so that's basically a bit of a rant, and I'm not really sure how well those types of things would be received by many good people in the industry. But we really have to get off our asses and work together. Combine forces. Death is coming for us all. And for us to be nibbling on the edges and not facing it directly and saying, this is how we're going to take this sucker down, and move forward with that at all speed without any extraneous thoughts, then we'll be found holding the bag at the end of the day, and there'll be nothing for us or our parents when it is. That's what I'm terrified of, actually. After all this work, after all these years, all these put into all of this, I now understand it comprehensively, why things are slow in science. And it's because the people who need the therapies are not in charge of their development. So that is as simple and practical as it gets. Anything else is window dressing. Give the power to the people who need the therapies. We will get them in the shortest time possible. Their technology and technical difficulties are all there to be solved, but what is fueling the energy behind the solution? If a delay means an extra $100,000 in someone's pocket or an extra 10% equity in a company, a delay of a year, a few thousand lives, maybe a few million, lost, but you get another $1 million in your bank account. We are dealing with it's an interesting period in time when the pandemic has really shown the cracks in the system and the motivation, and ripped away some of the illusions of what it is that we're dealing with here. And it comes down to every individual has to take responsibility for themselves and for making this happen, because The status quo is not going to make it happen. The status quo is happy. That's why it's called the status quo. So if we want to change things, we have to be a little bit more engaged and not let others make our decisions for us, because they have different incentives and different motivations. And we need everybody. We do need everybody. We need the people who want to make a lot of money, who are excited about the energy in the field and want to get started and impact and making a big dent. But we have to do this very strategically and intelligently based on science.
Yep.
And I want to turn it into a math equation. I want to have minimization of time as the delta t with the integral from 0 to k, and then all of the different terms of the calculus, types of equation. And I want to solve for delta t, the minimum of delta t. And I want to see what happens to all of those variables. How much money do you need to pump into the equation to minimize delta t? And how do we create an equation that self-modifies and adjusts, so that as new information comes in, we can see. And then I want to reward people who work towards minimizing time, not maximizing profit. But you have to be able to measure time and how much a person minimizes it by in order to reward that. So you need metrics. But right now the metrics are it's just very crude, how much money you make, how many users you've got, that sort of thing. Very primitive, very gross, not really that informative, frankly. Not if you actually want to get interventions. Yep. Billions of dollars spent on Alzheimer's, research down the tube, but trying to attack A beta plaque, and they're still spending the money on A beta plaque. And it's just got to give your head a shake. It's just like when for 10 years, it's been clear that A beta plaque is not the only part of the story. In fact, it may only be a small part. When you see what's happened in science as well as in business, it's hard to trust anybody that they actually want interventions, because they keep going down the same dead ends for the same reasons. And and we need to make another alternative, a different option, so that the intelligent people who want things to happen are given a vehicle that they can trust that it will get the job done. So that's kind of what I formed OpenCures for, was to, let people know that somebody who's been doing this for a long time and is sincere about minimizing time to the development of interventions. If people want interventions, come, talk to me. Yep. If you want an intervention, in the shortest period of time, if you want to make a system that is capable of generating an in silico prediction engine for testing millions of hypotheses of interventions simultaneously, that's what we need. We need that will light up the night, and we won't be struggling in the dark with, could it be autophagy? Or maybe it's this, or maybe it's that, or maybe it's this other thing, and maybe it's stem cells, and maybe it's, my God. We've been doing this dance, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic for many, many years already. And I've had it. I've seen this before. I've seen I know where the garbage truck is going. I don't have to follow it, and that's when I see now. But it's so nice to see all the new energy. I've got so much new friends, new connections, new sincere young people who, especially in the crypto industry, or who've made a significant amount of funds, but were never seeking them, but they just happen to be lucky enough and smart enough to make a few good bets, but it wasn't their goal, wasn't to become crypto billionaires or millionaires. Right. So that is a whole new source of energy for the right reasons. And now we just got to give them some alternatives and to the status quo, even within our own organization. So as you can tell, I do have no trouble talking. So
you mentioned a lot of important things there, and I just I once again have to say how it's a very elegant model, and the things that obviously pop up to me and sort of my own experience, as you were saying, we don't have time for the new rapamycins, the new metformins and everything. We have, on the repurposing front, you have this issue that, yeah, we could spend hundreds of millions of dollars to test these products that are generic now, and sort of then what happens. And I think that feeds very nicely into what you're doing in the
We need
OpenCures
to make it
model.
cheaper. We need to make it
Exactly.
cheaper. Yeah.
And also, but I was talking to Eric at the Buck Institute on a couple months ago on an episode, and they just started getting involved in this whole combination thing. Now, combinations are a hot topic for me. They have been. It's something that I accidentally fell into about 20 years ago in the pharma industry, but there was never a way to get it done. You could never develop drug A, B, and C before you develop drug A and develop drug B and develop drug C, and spent billions of dollars doing that. And so combinations wouldn't happen for decades after the fact. Your model also opens up a lot of interesting possibilities there as well. At the same time, the FDA is beginning to say, hey, maybe we should let innovative models look at A, B, and C together before they're tested. So I think there's a lot of interesting things that the OpenCures, model, as I understand it, can really be used for. I think,
yeah, exactly. The power is that there's a lot of low risk stuff that people do, including eating food, and exercise and a whole bunch of things. And we still haven't looked at what it is that these system-wide sort of interventions can do, or why they do, or how they do, because they're not a drug, basically, and people have a tough time doing them anyway. But this multiple combinations, we just had a chat last night with the presentation, and if we did combinations of flavonoids, right? We're thinking about flavonoids. Now, flavonoids in my own thesis blew me away. So apigenin reduces all of the NF-kappa B pathway phosphorylation.
Yep.
And I thought, oh, well, that's how it's controlling inflammation. And then you start looking at the AKT pathway. Oh my goodness, it's turning down phosphorylation of S6K and mTOR. And then you look at GSK3 beta. Oh my God, it's also being inhibited, but for phosphorylation. That means it's turning things on. So apigenin, a single flavonoid available in chamomile and everything else, has these pleiotropic promiscuous actions. And it is inhibiting kinases, different kinases to different degrees. So it would inhibit CK2 by 80%, but it would not inhibit, it would do like mTOR by 60%, basically. But then you look at a very closely related flavonoid, which is luteolin or fisetin. Fisetin and apigenin, the only difference between them is a hydroxyl group, a single hydroxyl group. Other than that, the whole ring structure, everything is completed. But fisetin kills senescent cells. Yep. Do we know the mechanism of action? I think it must be because it is inhibiting a kinase, and that kinase is engaged with the apoptosis pathway, and somehow it is pushing. So it has a different profile. It has a different kinase inhibition profile than apigenin, which doesn't cause senescent cells, isn't a senolytic. Fisetin is a senolytic. The difference is a hydroxyl group. And there is a company here in San Francisco that can measure the inhibition of 300 kinases, if not more, by a single agent. And then if you take all these flavonoids, which are proposed to be ATP mimetics because they come out in the crystallographic structures, they actually come out bound to the ATP pockets. And so they actually nestle their way in there, and they bind some ATP pockets, more or less. They inhibit apigenin. David Sinclair showed that apigenin inhibits CD38, which consumes NAD, but it inhibits CD38 by inhibiting with the ADP portion, with the ribose portion, or the adenine portion. It doesn't care about the the kinase. So apigenin, any enzyme that uses ATP for anything, or GTP, or CTP, or UTP, probably, is going to be inhibited by these ATP mimetics. And these are all flavonoids, and they all, so when we're eating fruits and vegetables, we're taking in all these combinations of ATP mimetics, which differentially inhibit or potentially stimulate different biological pathways. We are taking in an orchestra of, playing this thing. Now, how do we figure out with combinations, it affects the NF-kappa B pathway more than it affects the AKT pathway. So if you get rid of the kinases and you just go to the pathway levels with inputs and outputs, we would predict that different flavonoids would enhance activity in one pathway and not so much the other, or vice versa. So we can target people who have particular disorders if we want to alter different pathways. That's what we're co-evolved with these bloody compounds to do. Yep. So we don't need drugs anymore. I really don't think we do. I think we should be able to do these low risk stuff with the OpenCures platform and figure out what of these natural products are going to be the best.
And the interesting thing, because I have a passion for this area as well. I did spend about 10 years in sort of the phyto medicinal space. You know, I looked at your PhD work on apigenin and the SASP and breast cancer and all that. And it's funny because here again, because I look at, and I'm gonna say one's right and one's wrong, because you have a fascinating understanding of natural products, not just in the case of your PhD, but you know that any plant product that has apigenin in it has 500 other substances there that most likely are, some are senolytic and some are senomorphic and some do all sorts of other cool things that we don't know. And then you founded Ocean at the same time, which is senolytic as well, but a very different approach. I would argue that tomorrow you and I could take, I don't know, off the hand, a food that contains apigenin, whatever. You said chamomile at the beginning. Yeah. We could take that to FDA tomorrow and do a phase 3 clinical study.
This isn't a product that we sell, but it's a product I take.
Sure.
And it's got NMN in it as well as apigenin.
Right.
So when you take NMN, stimulates the production of NAD, and apigenin inhibits the consumption of it.
I've always argued, and I've been there before, and it's a long story. I won't go into it because this is your show, but you and I could take that extract tomorrow and go to FDA and get a phase 3 clinical trial on the books to study it. And most likely have a decent clinical result. And that would technically be the first phase 3 clinical trial in aging that happens, long before Ocean's ever going to get to phase 3. I'm not saying that's good or bad.
No, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
Let's talk a little bit about it. Putting that aside, though, we'll talk about that in another episode. But you know, you have a very a beautiful understanding of the potential of natural products. I love them very much. Talk a little bit though about your time in senolytics. I mean, you spun Ocean out. It was sort of, I guess that was one of the first SENS opportunities that came out of the SENS research. I don't know if Unity came after that or whatever the order. Talk a little bit about sort of your experience with. In this case, now this is almost a pure drug development play, an advanced drug development play, but talk a little bit about your experience there as well, what you've run into, especially because, and introduce a little bit about the sort of the concept behind what you're doing with the suicide genes and all that, because it's an advanced therapeutic. Yeah. What have you run into in terms of when you've gone to FDA and said, hey, we want to do X, Y, and Z with this drug?
So, well, we've been doing it since 2012, and Matt Schultz was the first guy to pick up on the P16-driven suicide construct potential. And because Judy Campisi was talking about the 3MR mouse at a conference, and Matt says, this would be a great gene therapy. And so we've been thinking about how do you deliver those to cells in a robust enough fashion? And we were looking at different vehicles at the time. One was, we were actually looking at Ligandal, which is a company run by Andre and, goodness gracious, at the same time, I can't remember, there was 2 other founders. But that they had a nanoparticle system that could package up, say, a genetic P16-driven suicide switch. Now, the concept behind inducing apoptosis in senescent cells is, I think, fairly well known. But in case people don't know, apoptosis is a suicide program. Yep. So that when a cell becomes damaged, it can commit suicide and remove itself, and then the immune cells come along and pick up the pieces, basically. Senescent cells that are resistant to become resistant to apoptosis and do not die. And they just sit there in the tissues and they continue to secrete inflammatory molecules and contribute to just, a general ruckus and havoc in your eventual biochemistry. So we wanted to kill them with this suicide switch because they were misbehaving. So we just took the normal genetic circuit responsible for inducing apoptosis suicide program, put it in a nanoparticle, inject it into the blood, basically, and allow the nanoparticle will be absorbed by different cell types and all over systemically. And those cells which are actually senescent would then engage the suicide program. You then follow that up with a drug, and all of the suicide switches which have been activated are then turned on completely, and the cells die. So you're able to induce selective suicide in cells which are only senescent and not normal cells. So that, of course, is pretty much a gene therapy. The FDA is not really all that interested in gene therapies, and they were even less interested in novel delivery mechanisms. But what we fast forward to is the pandemic, and the very mechanisms for the vaccines, these nanoparticles, is pretty much what we have been working with, which we've been having such a difficult time getting to be adopted and understood as a viable method for delivering anything into cells. So, and this is again, underlines, we would be looking for funding from, the usual, suspects here in the Bay Area. And they would look at the technology and they go, it's too new, it's untried, we're going to, Unity is following the normal, or sort of the more normal path, more accepted path. And of course, they got a lot of the gravity and they got a lot of support, and rightly so. They kicked the door down. And but what separated us from them is that our technology actually worked. and it worked since day one. So from the first animals that we injected with this P16 driven suicide switch, we could see loss of beta galactosidase and then a whole bunch of different other markers. So it was working. And whereas Unity had a little bit more trouble doing that, because they were trying to find a drug to do the same thing that a gene actually does normally. So we were working at the code level. Ocean is working at the code level, whereas Unity was trying to influence the code through drugs, and that's always a harder play. So, I mean, that's basically what we did. The FDA is now, I think, becoming a little more open to these types of things, and they better be, because it's a generic method of delivering not just genes, but anything you would want: proteins, chemicals, chemotherapies. mRNA now is becoming a big deal, transiently expressing different proteins. I mean, mRNA is what the vaccines are. So whether we should be able to introduce any mRNA into different tissues and get the tissues to transiently express different types of proteins and genes. We need more information now. We need more data. How do we intervene? What do we do? What do we use? What is the temporal thing? Combinations and stuff. So it's exciting. Oh, yeah. Let me just turn this off there.
Sure. Yeah. I wanted to talk about. I just wanted, obviously, for the audience to understand that sort of the breadth of, even in a specific focus like senolytics or xenomorphic, whatever you sort of term the space, that you're active on sort of a continuum here. You realize the potential of the advanced interventions, but also the mesh products. Yeah,
I've been very lucky, because for my entire time that I've been doing this, I've been awake and I've been watching, and I made some. I don't know. I used to think I was just lucky, but no. I picked when I saw what Aubrey was doing, I thought, I'm going to do this and I'm going to help him. And I volunteered, without expectation for any kind of return. I volunteered, and it turned out to be, my goodness, Aubrey was a force to be reckoned with, and a major, major change agent. And throughout my entire, career now, you can pick winners. I haven't picked a single, I've made a lot of good calls, and I'm not trying to pat myself on the back. I'm just trying, I'm really surprised sometimes at the things that have come over the transom, almost, and just trying to see, what should I spend my time thinking about? Because this is, you aren't going to get your time back. So choosing what you want to think about is really the most key thing that you can do.
Kevin, early on, you mentioned your parents, and I had this several months ago. I had Dr. Helene Gale on, who is at the Chicago Consortium now, but she used, for a couple of decades, she was at CDC, sort of in the heyday of HIV, and I asked her at the time. I said, what happened back in the day that turned HIV from something that we were dumping hundreds of millions of dollars into something we were dumping hundreds of billions of dollars into? And she said, it's very simple. It was when the people that had HIV became the face of the movement. I'm sitting here thinking about your parents, thinking about me and you, because I guess we're becoming somewhat elder statesmen. But I love the energy, as you were saying, of the younger generation that's coming along, and some
they
teenagers.
Have all the time. They have all more time than we do.
But I just wonder, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Are we, I say, the longevity biospace, in comparison to, say, elder care or age tech, which is a totally different space, are we getting the elderly involved enough in this whole thing? Because it was very profound the way she said that. I started thinking, I see a lot of young faces, and that's great, but are we really exciting? Because I see billions and billions of dollars going into age tech and elder care still. The billions are starting to flow in this, but have we gotten your parents involved more? My parents they're not here anymore, but my in-laws are. Are we doing enough to get that generation involved? Because I think they have a place here.
Absolutely not. They are the customer.
Yeah.
They're the customer for these technologies, and we've given them absolutely zero influence over their development because we've written them off effectively, because we automatically in the back of our minds think there's no hope for them. And that is basically why we don't even like thinking about it. That's why people turn away from it. It's why they turn away from thinking about their own mortality, the mortality of their loved ones. It's our chicken shit attitude to face up to death that is causing us to not make the progress that we have it in our hands. That is not a bad attitude when you can't do anything. Otherwise you just drive yourself crazy thinking about, everybody dying. Oh my God, what a fun guy at a party you are, But at the same time, when you do have the potential of the new technologies that are coming in, AI, sequencing, mass spectrometry, multiple thousands of, it's just amazing, the potential. We have to get past this, I don't want to think about it anymore, and actually put our minds to it and say, this is a problem that needs solved in the shortest period of time, because the old people don't have that much time. Let's make it, let's go all out, for them, because by definition, if we make it in time for them, it will be in time for us. And I am the most selfish person on the planet. I can't believe the survival instinct in people. Where is it? When I first started getting involved, I was going, as soon as people start understanding that aging is an approachable problem, they're going to be like herds, heading for the exits. We're going to have to be careful, but it's exactly what what's this new Don't Look Up says. Like people are locked into this kind of zombie it's not even pro-death trance. It's just like anti-life trance. It's something else in addition to that. People don't want to hope, and they don't want to change, because you don't want to have to retool. You don't want to, if you hope, that means you may actually have to do something, take an action, and taking an action requires energy, and you'd rather be doing something else with that energy. And so Schrodinger's cat has always got to be, people don't want to know. They want to remain ignorant. They want to remain ignorant because as long as they're ignorant, they don't have to take action. And it is human psychology at its most amazingly bizarreness, because the individuals, even the most psychopathic person who's interested in money, can know that they can't make more money when they're dead.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like common freaking sense. And at every stage this is why it's not complicated. The answers to minimizing time to development of interventions are not complicated. We need to quit complicating it. That's I think the major problem.
Kevin, while I have you, it's I think 15 or 16-year anniversary of SENS now. I got the opportunity to walk around in the SENS metaverse last week at the comp. I guess I'm showing my age. I had a horrible time in there, but
I liked it. I thought as far as
maybe I need the goggles or something next time. But you know, obviously you got so much going on at SENS. Give us sort of some top line about 2022. I mean, you have obviously the seven paths. We talked a little about analytics. You don't need to go into all of this the SENS seven, but what's hot for 2022? What are you excited about? Obviously, you're working on your stuff, but other SENS things that are coming down the road that you might want to mention for this year coming out of the pandemic.
I think we've had a humongous windfall last year with Richard Hart's Pulse event.
Sure.
So there is a lot of people thinking about what we can do and how we can do it. One thing for sure is they're revamping the educational aspects. So because we need new brains, we need fresh brains, and we need them properly trained and properly oriented. So that is, for me, is a big deal, and there's going to be a significant amount of effort put there. We're going to be working towards different the SENS strands themselves. Of course, we still got the allotopic expression internal projects going on, and there's going to be quite a bit of probably engagement with the donors going forward. More than before. We're definitely SENS is evolving. I'm sure everybody's aware of that, and we're looking forward to what is coming. And we encourage everyone, if they have ideas, please do send them in. Talk to the science. If you have a proposal, let us know.
Awesome. Kevin, as I said, at the beginning, I've watched you for a couple of decades now,
and vice versa, Ira. Just your understanding with BioQuark, and just some of the way you understand systems and logic, and that we're talking about regeneration. Stem cell activity actually was one of the things that I've always picked up on from you is really how do we induce. So I know we have to go, but the one thing that I'd like to
take your time.
The one thing that I'd like to see, any bona fide intervention or age reversal is going to have to involve restoring the capacity of the body to heal wounds. I am so sick of getting a scratch that needs a month to form a scar. Mm-hmm. I cannot tell you. It is just, I feel like I've been let down and by my own body and biology. And I mean, I'm still not too, I'm pretty healthy, but when you look at how fast your wounds heal, it's clear that you're not in Kansas anymore. This is the real world here, and we're not going to be. So I want to see not just talking about Horvath clock and methylation this and all of this stuff. I mean, these are great sort of beginnings, but we want to see functional outcomes. I want to see restoration of hair color. I want to see this go back to black. And since I've been taking NAC, frankly, my hair is actually starting to get color. This was all white, and now I'm starting to get brown again. So there's some, and anyway, I'm just excited. I'm excited by some of the stuff that's going on that is showing promise, and all of the new stuff that's being uncovered, all the new tools and the technologies. And so it just highlights, again, collaboration, folks. We need to create a consortium, and we need to collaborate together, and it needs to be an all-out, let's get this done. Let's find some people with enough resources and enough smarts to understand that they are on the chopping block, and they can either worry about, making $1 billion, or they can worry about getting another year to make $1 billion.
And throwing it back to you too. I mean, I take my hat off because the principle of self-directed research and everything you have going on at OpenCures, it shows that you two are a systems thinker, that this isn't just going to get done in a couple biotech companies developing drugs the original way, that there's a lot of paths here.
Not even a $3 billion biotech company.
If $3 trillion wouldn't get that done that way. So but we'll do another show on those topics, but I'm rooting you on, Kevin, and everything you're doing, as I've been, and I appreciate once again the time you've taken to come talk to us. For everybody that's going to be listening to this show across the podcast network, so watching on the YouTube channel, you've been listening to Dr. Kevin Perrott, adjunct professor, University of Alberta, founder and CEO, OpenCures, co-founder advisor, Ocean Biotechnologies.
Okay, enough.
President of Global Health Policy, Space Policy Institute, and co-founder and treasurer, SENS Research Foundation. He does it all, multi-talented. Kevin, once again, thanks for taking the time out of your schedule, obviously, to come on this show. Thanks for everything you've been doing and continue to do. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for what you're doing. A really very impressive story.
Thank you very much again, Ira. You have a wonderful evening.
You too.